This is Plug Unplug. I am MT Karthik, you can call me MTK, and this is part 8. 2008, the election of 2008, was the YouTube election. I like being firm on points, whether other people have said it or not is irrelevant then, because I'm stating it as a fact within the context of my research. I grew up as a child writing my own newspaper using a small typewriter and making copies of it and selling it around the neighborhood for 5 cents, and working my way up through, recording with tape, cutting all of that. I've produced news in every possible context that there is, and I've covered elections for 2 decades. I did in many different media. The election of 2008 was that explosion upon the scene of YouTube as an element which fractionalized content. And that is something I hope that you can take away from Plug Unplug as stated by MTK. It is cemented that the position of the internet is at the forefront of information delivery for news and elections coverage now. That was Obama Girl, and McCain admitting he couldn't use email. The net played, and has played since, an important part in nearly every campaign. It is now common for our social and cultural institutions to include videographic data at all public venue. Most academics are connected, and thus no one can disconnect. But I think unplugging for the short term is still possible. Over the last 30 years, I've done it, and I've felt this immense separation from the plugged-in world by the act of doing this. I mean, it's a purposeful act. I'm not intellectually incapable. I'm unplugging. Several things happen. You immediately begin to connect more with other people who are unplugged, most often not by choice. It also keeps a very clear line between reality and the net. I mean, here I am taking a book I wrote 8 years ago and reading it to you, and rewriting it in effect as I read it to you and posting it to YouTube. 8 years ago, I wouldn't have done that, and so many different ways of administering information are now out there. I'm a reader, and I will always be a reader, and my son is a reader, and we will always be readers, I think. But the numbers of us are shrinking, and the numbers of people who are consuming data through video and through audio and through other means are rapidly increasing. Is literacy kind of going out the window? Is there such a thing as visual literacy replacing it? I think these are questions that are things we have to address. I mean, they're being addressed, but still, they interest me. So, what is it that I am outside of when I say I'm unplugged from the plugged-in world? Can it be said to exist independent of the real world? If there were nuclear war and the real world were destroyed and the plugged-in world were to somehow be able to maintain itself underground, does that make it more real than the real world? Or is it just a rationalization, a fantasy projection of our marketplace? I'm leaning toward the latter. The scramble to commercialize the internet became a powerful act of authority that began an assault by global capitalism upon my generation, like a beating on the back, a process that has resulted in broad but superficial interconnectedness, the breakdown of privacy, the consolidation of all mass media, the creation of commercial and political propaganda, and ultimately sponsorship of unilateral wars for corporate interests, and a kind of enslavement to consumer technology. A profound frustration for many millions of people was that interconnected technology existed in 2001, 2002, and 2003, and despite many organized actions, distribution of educational materials across the world about Afghanistan and Iraq, and the imperial corporate interests of the USA and the UK and the Soviets over decades, it failed to author a peaceful response to the attacks of 9/11. Now, 11 years later, we have what we call the Arab Spring, within which social media played such an active role. But we were unable then to resist the juggernaut of manipulation of these exact same tools by Rove, Bush, Cheney, et al., and Blair, who perpetuated outright lies with the new information tools. Iraq has WMDs and can bomb their neighbors. The 16 words during the State of the Union, the yellow cake, uranium, Nigeria nonsense, and the utter ridiculousness that Iraq was somehow involved in 9/11. These things, if anything, Gulf War I and II cemented control of the press by the masters of war. At last, they invented the embedded journalist and consolidated the mass media into a handful of hands. Global media capitalists used the web like television and other mass media before it to redefine our world in terms of their ownership. And while we all gain by the amazing traffic of information the internet has brought, privatization of knowledge and mass-scale manipulation through the medium is now apparent. It's only slowly yielding to the power that this medium has to organize and create social change, and a free internet is being assaulted every day. These tools have been witnessed in uprisings, as I said, in Iran, Afghanistan, Gaza, Honduras, and most recently Tunisia and Egypt. We've gone over, so I'm going to end part 8 here. This is Plug Unplug by me, MTK.